Hey everyone, it is E and welcome back to my channel. In today's video I'm going to be doing a creepy cute clown girl doll repaint, and this is my concept sketch that I did ahead of making the doll, which I think is really cute, and so I'm excited to jump in and show you how I brought this to life. I am using this Ever After High doll. I don't know what her original name is. She might be an apple white doll. I previously repainted her, but I thought it was time for another go at her face. I don't dislike the original repaint I did, but I was looking at my dolls that I have available to repaint, and I thought that this girl would make the best candidate for a creepy clown doll, so that is why I chose her. And the clothes that she was wearing will be recycled and repurposed for a future doll, and I'm going to try and be as economical and save some of her hair as well. Her hair's not great, but it's decent, so it might be good for a future doll. We'll see. It's a little bit harder to remove a repainted face than it is to remove a factory painted face, so you just need to give it a little extra elbow grease, but it'll come off eventually if you decide to repaint one of your own dolls. And there she is, all cleaned off. Now I'm going to chop her hair off and replace it with this really cute, I think it's called Raspberry Sorbet is the name of it. I can't remember which website it came from. I got it several years ago and it's just now being used. But to remove the doll hair, of course, you want to cut it as close to the scalp as you can. And from there, scrape it out on the inside. It's probably one of my least favorite steps of all of doll repainting. And you'll notice on my channel, the last two doll repaints I did, I used the doll's factory hair, and that's partially because if the hair is already decent quality, I don't find any reason, I don't think there's any need to necessarily remove it. And as I said before, see, I'm tying off her hair to try and save it for a future project. So you don't have to reroot a doll's head or make a wig if you don't want to, if the original hair is fine. See, now you have to scrape out the plugs from the inside, and my hand cramps up so badly doing this. I absolutely hate it. And it makes your tweezers get all sticky from the glue on the inside. These are the things that other people may not mention in their videos, but yeah, it's gross. But when all of the hair and all of the face paint is gone, it is very satisfying to have a blank canvas to start with. Now I'm going to give her new hair. So instead of rerooting it, I did a faster route and just glued hair wefts directly onto her head with a hot glue gun. It's a little bit messy and I didn't do a good job with the part, but it's going to be covered up with a hat anyway, which was part of my original design, so it doesn't really matter. I made this little hat out of felt, and I decorated it with felt and a pom-pom. That is the first bit of clothing done for her. And see, it looks pretty cute. I have masked off her hair with saran wrap and I've put pins in it to keep it in place. And in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and do her clothes. So I just sewed a one piece, like a unitard, out of this black cotton fabric and sewed that all together off screen. I'm very bad at sewing, so you will never basically see me sew on camera because it's such a struggle and it makes me so angry when I'm doing it because I always make so many mistakes. But it turned out pretty cute. And this is what it looks like right now. And I added Velcro to the back to seal it up, I guess, and make it removable. You can always sew your dolls directly into the clothes that they're going to wear if you don't plan on changing their outfits. I'm using this plastic neck ruffle accessory that came with this apple white doll originally. I think she's an apple white. But anyway, I'm painting it orange to match the ruffle in my concept art. Once it's dry, I put it on as kind of like to see what it looked like in place. And now I'm going to be just hot gluing on the details of her jumpsuit. Now these little hip triangles, I don't know what you would call them, but these little details on the hips were not present in the original concept sketch, but I just thought that they would look good, and I think I was right. They do look good. So like I said, I'm just gluing them on, and I'm not using a ton of glue. I would honestly recommend getting like a mannequin doll, like a doll you don't care about, and doing this type of stuff on that doll, because the hot glue did kind of seep through her clothes and onto her body. It wasn't a big deal. I just scraped it off later, but you have to be careful with that. And I glued on these little ruffles to all of the hems of the ankles and of the shirt sleeves. And I put an extra pom-pom on the ruff. And I think it looks really cute, actually. I'm quite pleased with how her outfit turned out, and I think that it's really faithful to my original concept sketch. Now I'm going to give her some shoes. I have these kind of thick looking heels, and they've got spikes on the heel, which I think is appropriate for like kind of a creepy cute girl. And I'm painting them orange all over, and I'm going to paint the toes yellow as well. I recommend, if you're going to paint doll shoes like this, you have to do so many layers. I just did one on camera, but I think in real life I probably did like 5 or 6 layers to get it opaque. It's easier if you stick the shoe onto like a hot glue stick, which is what I've done here. It makes it easier to hold the shoe, and you can get it at all angles. And then if you have something to stick the glue stick down into, it is easy to set it up to dry. The one issue with painting shoes and painting so many layers on the shoe is that once it dries and you actually put it on the doll's feet, it's really likely to crack. Which in this case, it's okay because she's like a creepy Halloween girl. So if the paint cracks, it looks all right. But if you're not doing a creepy Halloween girl, the cracking paint will not look very good. So to finish off the shoes, I decided to glue some purple pom-poms onto the toes, and it looks really cute. And the purple is to kind of tie in with the purple of her hair. Finally, we can start on the face, which is obviously my favorite part of a doll repaint. Now for this one, I think I did 4 or 5 layers. So I did 3 dry layers and then 2 wet layers. I definitely don't recommend trying to do dry stuff with wet stuff on the same layer. So for example, if you're going to need to bust out acrylic paint to boost up some of the colors, don't do it on the same layer that you used watercolor pencils for other details. That's just to kind of try and keep everything crisp. And if you get your watercolor pencils wet, they might run. That is something to consider. So obviously the first layer of the face up is just kind of like mapping and deciding where everything is going to go on the face. And it's super, super transparent, and it's not very opaque, and the colors aren't super vibrant. The other thing is that when I first sprayed her face with Mr. Super Clear sealant to get a base layer going, I was at the very tail end of a can of Mr. Super Clear, so it didn't really spray a very good solid layer. So this first layer of her face was done on basically the thinnest layer ever of Mr. Super Clear, so it's really hard to get any vibrancy built up if you don't have a good layer of Mr. Super Clear. But I don't like to be wasteful, so I try to get away with using as little Mr. Super Clear as possible. So even though that wasn't a very good spray, I went ahead and made an effort to get started on that layer anyway. Now I think we're on to the second layer, and you will start to see it is much more vibrant, and the colors are showing up so much better now. And it's because I got a new can of Mr. Super Clear, and I was able to spray a thick layer and able to get a nice good surface to draw on. As you can tell, I have done her eyes kind of asymmetrically. So her right eye, left eye if you're looking at her, has orange eyelashes and a purple triangle over it. And then her left eye, which is her right eye if you're looking at it, has purple eyelashes with orange triangles on it. But both of her eyes, like the eyeballs themselves, are the same, and they are supposed to kind of look like crescent moons. So I guess It depends on how you're looking at it. Either she's got yellow eyes and it's just the eye shine that makes it look like a crescent moon, or her eyes are actually shaped like crescent moons. And like I said, it's kind of up to you to decide what you think it is. But as you can see, I didn't give her pupils, and I just decided for this doll that that's not what I wanted to do, and so I didn't. You can tell also I stretched her lips way out. I didn't actually make her lips any thicker, but I did make them much wider. And I also, this is the first time I've ever done this, I gave her an open mouth smile, which the original mold of the doll face does not have an open mouth smile, so that was something that I did on my own and had to kind of build up with acrylic paint later. But it looks really cool already, so I'm quite happy with how her smile turned out looking, and you'll see more details of that here in the end. I didn't make her nostrils super dark, but I do like to bring out the details of the face mold as much as I can by like coloring in those nostrils and doing stuff like that. I used a lot of this white pastel to try and make her skin look white like a clown. I wasn't necessarily too concerned with her actually looking like she had face paint on, but I did want to make her as pale as possible because I thought it would make her makeup stand out. And it was really hard to achieve that. Like I said, I had to use several layers and a lot of Mr. Super Clear to try and build up the white. And I'm using a white watercolor pencil to add highlights to her eyelids. I didn't add a ton of detail to her eyelids because I didn't want her eyes to look super realistic because she's supposed to be kind of creepy. So she does have eyelids. They're hard to see, and I didn't make them super dark or super visible because I wanted her to look super wide-eyed and, yeah, creepy. So I did give her orange and purple mascara, I guess is what you could call it. But I did still want to give her like more or less brown eyeshadow, or not eyeshadow, eyeliner, I guess, to make her eyes pop and to create contrast between the white of her eyes and her eyelids, basically. Okay. That is the last dry layer, and now we're moving on to the wet layers. So, as I mentioned before, if you aren't intending for your watercolor pencils to be wet, you need to be very careful about not mixing your wet layers and your dry layers. But at this point, I wet my watercolor pencils to help them be more opaque and to help them be more saturated and vibrant. So it's also kind of a trade-off because when your watercolor pencils are wet, they're not as hard, and so it's harder to get super sharp detail. So it's, like I said, it's a trade-off, and it's something that you have to kind of consider when you're doing a doll repaint. Do you want your details to be super duper crisp, or do you want the colors to be super duper vibrant? If you're very talented and you've got a super steady hand, then you can achieve the vibrancy and saturation with acrylic paint, for example. But I'm not very good with acrylic paint, especially on such a small scale, to do fine detail work. So I prefer the watercolor pencils because they're easier to control. They aren't quite as opaque as acrylic paint is, but they, like I said, they offer better control. And I feel like you can already tell how big of a difference it makes, especially with her irises, how much more vibrant they are with wet watercolor pencils. And if you're using watercolors and watercolor pencils, then I highly suggest having paper towels on hand to sop it up if it gets a little too wet. Okay, now I'm coming in with acrylic paint. I'm pretty satisfied with how opaque I was able to get the white teeth and the white of her eyes with just the watercolor pencils, but I always find it a little bit easier to use acrylic paint just to finish getting it as absolutely saturated as you want it to be. Now, I will say I struggled with the mouth a little bit. I think it turned out well in the end, but I had to go back and forth a lot, and I used the watercolor pencils to kind of push the acrylic paint back, if that makes any sense. So I kind of used the sharp tips of some of the watercolor pencils to crisp up the edges of the acrylic paint where I wasn't able to get it quite as sharp as I would like. Now with the acrylic paint, I painted on a little fang or a little tooth, but I didn't quite like the way it turned out. And so later you will see that she will get a three-dimensional tooth made out of paper clay, or air dry clay, I guess is what it's really called. Here with her purple eye triangle, I feel like I kind of got out of control a little bit with the watercolor pencil. So again, once you start getting your materials wet, they become harder to control, and I struggled with it, but it turned out okay in the end. But I had to finesse it, and I wound up making the eye triangle way bigger than what I had originally intended. But again, I think it looks good, so I'm happy with that. And as I said, I added a three-dimensional tooth, and you can see that now. I think it looks awesome, and I really like it. So the way I did that was I made it with air dry clay, then I painted it white with the same acrylic paint, because the clay is white, but it's not the same white. So I painted it with the same white as her other teeth to make it match. And then I glued it with super glue. And here I'm putting on acrylic varnish or gloss, whatever you want to call it, to kind of seal it all in. And that's basically the face done. Now, I'm not much for hairstyling in real life with my own hair and also with dolls. I'm not very good at it. So what I'm doing here, some of her bangs, as you can see, are sticking straight up. It's not a huge deal because she's going to be wearing a hat, but I did want it to stick, flatter to her head and lay down flatter. So what I did was I took this butter knife from my kitchen and I heated it up with my hair straightener, and I'm sort of using it to tame her hair, and it is working, but it didn't work quite as well as I'd like. So I mostly just relied on her hat to hold her hair down in the front. Now, in addition to fixing her bangs, I'm also giving her curls, and I'm using a technique that I learned from Papa Atelier, who is another big doll art channel on YouTube, where she calls these barbecue sticks. I would call them skewers, but basically you take the skewer and wrap the hair around it, and then you just use a hair straightener to curl it. So you just press it on the skewer and it curls the hair. And I'm actually shocked at how well this worked. Me, who cannot curl her own hair to save her life, was able to curl this doll's hair, and it looks really cute. And I was really impressed and surprised with myself that I was able to do it. So big shout out to Papa Atelier, who will probably never watch this video, but I really appreciate everything that I've learned from her and all of the other doll art channels on YouTube. You can see there that I tried to use a metal straw to do this, so I tried to heat up a metal straw and then curl the hair with that, but it didn't work very well. Now, I suppose it is time for the final reveal photos. I'm really happy with how she turned out, and I think she looks super cute. You may be able to tell I took some of these photos at a cemetery, which is a little bit morbid, but it suits her. She is a Halloween doll. That's all I'm going to say about this week's video. I hope you all really enjoyed it as much as I did, and I hope you have a very happy Halloween in spite of the circumstances in the world. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.